Ms. Grynspan's lecture speech, and then she will share the Q&A sections and will interact with the audience. Professor Grynspan.
Ms. Grynspan, Professor Song, delegates from UN, colleagues, guests, and students. Thank you, Ms. Grynspan, for such comprehensive, macro, thought-provoking, and insightful sharing. And I think talking about these issues in a university setting is really, very relevant. And in a sense, I feel very excited because as a university community, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and all this work will be very, very meaningful as well. So I would like to respond from this angle and try to encourage every colleague, every student, and our guests in different disciplines to try to work at different levels to reflect on what we should do or what we can do to make our country, our city, and the world a more sustainable place. And I'm really, intrigued by what you've done in Costa Rica, and I think that vision is very important. And where can you provide, most pertinent inputs to a good vision other than a university setting? So first, I think, as a scientific community, we can do a lot more research to really understand better the facts of what this urbanization has brought to humankind, and especially to people in our mother country. And I think I would encourage, us all to do more research in this area, because we actually, according to Professor Grynspan, we actually into an unknown territory in terms of scale, in terms of the issues and the problems that we are facing. The second part, more related to, I'm a planner and also soil scientist, is for soil scientists to really reflect on a lot of the value issues that you have raised. Other than developing more value-added, high-tech industries, industries that can help us to, resolve pollution issues. I think a lot of other soil scientists also ask about, is development equal to growth? Can we have alternative developments, alternative pathways of development that recognize people's, like what Professor Grynspan also said, people's right to the city, people's rights to the space, people's rights to the services. Like colleagues in other parts of the world are arguing that we should be building cities for the people and not for profits. How can we do it? How can we do it so that our urbanism, would be a fun one, a happy one, one that can actually accommodate a lot more people, engaging them, productively, and also allowing them to enjoy urbanism as a way of life. So that brings us to the third dimension, which I think the Chinese University of Hong Kong has, devoted a lot of resources to do. It's this challenge of interdisciplinary, or we were actually, advised to use the word transdisciplinary, because we're actually into unknown territories, to really pool our resources and our various disciplines together so that we can actually build cities, plan cities that actually can allow people to use their talents to contribute to a better and more sustainable future. As a planner, I actually am a great supporter of ecological democratization, to quote from Professor Randy Hester from UC Berkeley. And I can see our director of the planning department here as well. I want to quote from him, and he says, City Forum concretizes our values and reflect them back to us. City Forum can make us a more resilient society and more fulfilled individuals. And I think, whether many of you are not planners, but many of us are in the university still studying, working on various aspects. And I think that transdisciplinary approach will be very important for us to chart a more sustainable development pathway ahead. So I think I've said too much, and now I would like to open the floor to questions so that we can have a meaningful dialogue with Professor Grynspan. I see a hand up right away. Can someone pass her the microphone, please?
Hi, Professor Grynspan and honorable guests. We are representatives from the Chinese University of Hong Kong Model United Nations Club. And we have a question about prioritization. Because just now you identify a myriad of problems that we have to tackle with in order to achieve a human development-based city. But how do we prioritize all these problems? Like, we have environmental concerns to be tackled with, and we have to enhance the qualities of services, and we have to ensure protection of rights to migrant workers. We have all these many various problems. So in your opinion, or in the opinion of the United Nations, how should we prioritize all these things to be done in order to achieve human development-based cities?
Okay, shall we have a feel before Professor Grynspan respond to your questions? Any other questions? I see a few hands there. Maybe the gentleman.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for the presentation. When we talk about the cities, what I've been taught so far, and what we see is that cities grow and use the resources around them. What they actually produce is based on the things that come into them. As the people move into them, the cities will need more and more from the outside, but there'll be less and less people to provide it. What are the strategies to deal with this sort of movement of the people from providing for the cities to needing in the cities?
The gentleman at the back, and then the lady in the back.
Hi, Ms. Grynspan. I want to know, you have mentioned that there's many problems and also many achievements of in China urbanization, and I want to know how about your opinion about the government achievement during this period, and how about ideally, what do you think the government should play a role in this phase? Yes. Oh, thank you, Ms.
Thank you. The lady at the back. Sorry, the lady at the back. The green.
Hi, Professor Grynspan. My name is Wingxi Chiu, and I'm from the Sustainability Development course. And I was just wondering, because there's a lot of emphasis on government and policies, and I was wondering if the Chinese government has implemented any policies to encourage youth to stay and work in rural areas, and if so, whether they have been effective or not. Thank you.
Shall we ask Professor Grynspan to answer these 4 questions first before we open the floor for discussion?
Okay, very good questions, all of them. Let me first tackle the issue of privatization, and I will link them to the other question. First of all, there are 2 ways to go about privatization, yes? Prioritization, sorry. You can just list the problems, see how much, solve each of them according to what you think cost, see how much is your envelope, and decide to prioritize according to that, yeah? But the problem for me of going through how to call it, formal planning, only formal planning process, is that you decide what is that people want first and what is what people want second or third. So for me, really, the only way to really prioritize according to people's needs is including people in the decision. So it's true that you have to have a planning framework. You have to have the information, the data, the analysis that is required, but you cannot think as a government official, okay, that you have all the responses of what is that people want the most. You have to engage in a dialogue because these solutions will be local. You know, you won't be able to solve the problems of these cities at a macro level. You will have to solve the problems of these cities that affect people's life at the local level. And so the macro framework is not enough. You will have to go local and you will have to engage in terms of the prioritization of the sequencing of how you are going to do the things, you know, with the people. That would be my first answer. Now, the more complex problem is that many of the problems are interrelated. So even if you prioritize, you have to prioritize or implement in a way that you are not affecting the problem that will come next in your prioritization. You see, you will have to be able to consider the consequences of what you are putting as first priority on the other issues that are also at stake. And that's the most complex part, in my opinion, of the prioritization. Because if you make it very superficially, just as a linearity in terms of what goes first and what goes last, you may be encountering yourself in a worse position for the other priorities that you didn't put as first afterwards. So this is the most complex element in my view of the prioritization exercise. You have to have a complex system. You have to understand how all the rest is affected by what you do. And the other very complex problem, and maybe I can relate to that very, very strongly having been in a government, is how you have really a long-term view when you prioritize. Because in many parts of the world, I think that China is much less because you have a long-term perspective, but in many countries of the world, you have governments that prioritize the short-term returns and not the long-term effects. And as we say in my country, part of that, the problem of that exercise is that for governments that have 4 years in government and their change, yes, they think that we say in my country, one eats the pineapple, but is the other one that has the stomachache. You see? And so for governments, to invest in the long term for returns that are not going to happen and in their government cycle, but will happen in the other government cycle, it has a low incentive. So one of the things to really solve is how you make governments to have a long-term view vis-a-vis short-term wins. And this is essential for a sustainable development agenda. If you go for the short term, sustainability will never be an issue. Will never be tackled in the right way. And that's, if you prioritize short gains, short-term gains versus long-term development, that's the main problem to having your priorities right. With respect to these very, very good question in terms of growing needs in the cities, but those needs being served by less people in the outside of the cities. Food is a very clear example, yes? Now, in the International Poverty Forum, where I was 2 days ago in Beijing, in the International Day of Poverty, this was the main part of the discussion. It was about the interrelation between rural and urban. And that's why I refer to a continuum. You cannot solve city problems without agricultural investment and without productivity going up and without considering the services, the ecological services coming from the rural areas that affect cities. Water is a very clear example. So if you don't have really a land use, natural resource management that is more global outside the city, you won't be able to solve the problems of the city. I am less worried about less people serving those needs than to have the right conditions for the systems outside the cities to be able to serve. One very strong example is the degradation of ecosystems outside of cities, yes? Because the degradation of ecosystems will make the services, the environmental services coming outside the cities more expensive or unavailable, you know, for the sustainability of life, yes? So it's not so much about less people doing it, it's about having the right framework and the right incentives for the right behavior involved in the cities and outside them. With respect to the role of government and also related to the other question about government policies and what the Chinese government is doing, I will give a more general answer because I am not expert in China and I don't pretend to be after 3 days an expert, but let me tell you what I know, candidly. First of all, I really believe the role of government is essential in two ways. One, in terms of leadership. You will need leadership to make the changes in consumption and production patterns that you will need for the future. It won't come from the markets. The natural dynamic of the market won't make the changes. Yes? Because prices don't reflect the real value of the things for sustainable development. So markets won't be able to allocate resources in an efficient way. So it will have to come from policies. The policy frameworks have to be right. Policies matter because markets are not able to make the changes by themselves. You will have to drive those changes. Now, the only way to have policies right, because this is a very contentious issue, we have to understand that the transformation we are looking for will have winners and losers. Collectively, we will win in terms of a society for the future, you know. But in the short term, there will be winners and losers. There will be sectors of the economy of the world that will go down, while others will go up. Energy is a good example. Yes, we want to be much less dependent on fuels. And we want to be more dependent on renewable energies. And we want to be more efficient in terms of the use of energy. And that's the only way to go. But it means that all the economic sectors around the fuel economy will lose in the long run. So it's a very difficult transformation to make because the losers will fight against it and the winners may be too dispersed to have a very strong voice for it. So you need strong leadership to look ahead and make very bold decisions that are not easy from a political point of view, but it's the right way to go. And that's why I'm going to my first point. It's so important also the consultation with the people that is suffering the consequences of the pollution, of the water, of the unsustainability of the ecosystem, of the transport problem, etc. So you can find the right base to make the right policies and exert the right leadership for the transformation that is needed for the future. In terms of what the Chinese government is doing, in the parts that I know from the fifth year plan, and one of the features that we had in the International Poverty Forum, it is amazing how China is really going towards a much more renewable energy matrix in terms of the supply of energy. And I think that this is one of the main points that has to be considered. The other thing that it was very impressive from what I saw is the investment in education from kindergarten. You know that one of the things that really predicts achievement of children in school and high school is kindergarten and preschool attendance. And China is really investing heavily in not only in the basic education, but also in preschool education and a lot in research and development. That really gives, you know, in terms of the education that is needed and the investment needed for the future, I think that a very good signal. Just to mention a few, there were also very strong discussions about a cultural heritage in the cities, about the small towns in the rural areas, about the investment in agriculture that were very relevant, but I won't be able to go through it all the time. But I think that there is really a strong signal that, like in the past, growth is not enough. You know, it is very clear, and that resonates very much with UNDP, you know, that we have fought GDP as the indicator of progress for a long time. Since 1990, we are fighting against GDP indicator as the indicator for progress and for development. We don't think that is the right way to go. Growth is not enough. And many times growth, when it's not inclusive and sustainable, can be very good in the short term, very bad in the long term. So I think that the balance between environment and growth and a much more harmonious and balanced development is very strong today in the documents that I have read in terms of the government of China's program. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Span. I think the lady in the middle part, she's from the previous section, so. Lady first.
Thank you very much, dear professors, and I have two questions. And the first one is based on my observation. The indoor temperature in Hong Kong is very, very low. Here comes my first question. And how can these big cities like Hong Kong achieve their goals of sustainable development? And I think, in my opinion, it is not environmentally friendly. Okay? And the second question is this. During the past decades, China has changed a lot. And I think it's time that for young people to change for China. So what's your suggestion for young people? Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, you have to run around. I think that gentleman raised his hand first. Priority.
Hello, Ms. Grynspan and two honorable guests. I'm Ian Chen, also from the CU Model United Nations Club. Considering the question about Chinese development, actually in September this year, the State Council already released air pollution control action notification, which includes 1.7 trillion renminbi investment in the coming years to tackle the problem of air pollution. However, despite this giant leap forward for China in terms of tackling air pollution, it still draws lots of attacks from other countries, saying that even with this $1.7 trillion investment, the air pollution in major Chinese cities like Beijing are still far worse than other international cities around the world. So I'd like to know, what is UN role in terms of facilitating China's cooperation with other countries, despite certain countries taking giant steps in terms of improving their own city's sustainability? And besides, there's a side point about Chinese renewable energies. There's recent news saying that there's a development of hydroelectric power in China, which is very favorable. However, it also leads to loss of biodiversity, like in Changjiang, saying that the number of fish species have been greatly lowered. Is this the price, or are these biodiversity lost, as what you just said, as the losing parties that we'll also need to encounter in the future? Thank you very much.
Okay, this gentleman.
Hello, I'm from Department of Architecture. One of the major drivers for urbanization obviously would be the economic pool and the abundance of job in the cities. But with the growing problems of urbanization, do you see a reverse trend happening in the near future, namely de-urbanization? Obviously, this will not be a new idea. We see for most of planners in the 30s, the creation of garden cities in the UK of a prime example. But what has changed over the years is with the advent of technology, that if a new form of economy is in existence, in the rural area, for instance, do you actually see that we will find new form of communities, reversing the whole trend of urbanization? And would you see that happening in new developing countries like China? Thank you.
Okay, the two students at the back. I'll have you next round, sorry.
Hi, I'm a student registered in the Sustainable Development course, and I have a question about, just now you talk about the importance of environmental protection during the process of urbanization, and in Hong Kong we have 40% of land contributed to country parks. But because of the growing population, to solve the housing problem, some people suggest that we should develop our country parks to provide more land for housing. How would you comment on this topic, and in the context of Hong Kong, how can we balance, make a balance between housing and environment protection? Thank you.
Hi, I'm also a student from the Sustainable Development course, and my question is that you have just mentioned 3 measures adopted by Costa Rica in making it a peaceful, green, and educated city. Which of these 3 policies do you think that can be adopted in China? Say, can China invest as heavily in education that is compulsory and free for all citizens? And can China protect such a large area of its green spaces? And also, can China abolish its army so that it can provide more resources for the development of its people instead of investing in its army? And besides, do you think if China really adopt these 3 measures, how effective and feasible would that be? And would China face any obstacles or difficulties when implementing these policies? Thank you.
Okay, so maybe we can have Professor Grynspan responding to these questions before we reopen the floor.
Well, let me first say that I don't have all the answers. I only have so many questions like you, but let me try to address them in a way. Well, I'm so happy that you asked about the indoor temperatures. You know that the people that is with me will laugh because they have heard me say this. I explain what gender is, with air conditioning. And the reason why, what is the difference between gender differences and biological differences. You know that women and men have a different blood pressure, and that's a biological difference, yeah? What is the gender difference? Because when we are in conferences, you many times see men taking off their jackets and women taking off their shorts, yes? Women are freezing and men are comfortable. So what is the gender difference? The gender difference is who controls the air conditioning. So I think that if we women of the world will control the air conditioning, we will save the world a lot of tons of CO2. But you know that there are already some organizations that are taking very strong measures in terms of the temperature of the air condition that cannot be lower than 22 centigrades. Yes, between 22 and 24 is the comfortable way to be. Now, in many of the parts of the hottest places of the world is where I have experienced more cold. Yes, you have the temperature set at 80 degrees centigrade in many of the parts of the world where it's hot outside. Yes, and when you have a main driver and you get into a taxi cab, you know you need a coat, you know, to be able to maintain, you know, to be comfortable. So, very good question. Thank you very much. With respect to the UN role in the hydroelectric power, yes, I will take all of that. Yeah, I will answer about the youth afterwards. Yeah. With respect to the UN role, I think that an important role that we have, and that is a very strong part of our partnership with China, is precisely to be a transportation belt in terms of experiences in many parts of the world. Because you can get very isolated from very intelligent, creative, innovative solutions that have been done somewhere else. Now, there is nothing more difficult in development than to replicate a good experience. Yes, it's very difficult because good experiences are embedded in specific conditions, in specific cultures, and in specific circumstances. So it's very difficult to do that. But really, we and UNDP, we have put South-South and triangular cooperation at the center of our strategic plan and our strategic support to countries. And I think that that will continue to be very important for the future. Now, with respect to hydroelectric power, yes, it's true, because hydropower, especially the large-scale hydropower, yes, because now there is enough technology for medium and small-scale hydro that have much less consequences in terms of biodiversity. Now, in terms of the big hydropower, there is a tension between, you know, the renewable energy part and the environmental part of biodiversity. And it's not an easy goal, I have to say. My country relies almost 80% of its electricity supply on hydropower. And the rest is wind and geothermal. Yeah, more or less, you know. But so, you know, to renounce to hydropower as a renewable source of energy will be impossible. You know, so we will have to take the, you know, very border decisions in terms of hydropower and biodiversity. What you cannot do is to take up decisions without the communities that are going to be affected. Yeah, because many times very small changes in the design, in the engineering design can make the whole difference with respect to the area that will be affected. So I would say, you know, there is not only one way to do it. There are always several options. You can adapt many times the technology to have the less impact possible to have renewable energy. But it's a difficult goal. It's not an easy goal. In terms of the growing population and parks, you know, when land is scarce, how do you protect? You know, how do you have national parks or protected areas? And my point there is, and maybe the School of Architecture will will be better answer this call, because when I was Minister of Housing, I had this problem all the time. You know, I received requests to be more flexible in the border between what was protected for urbanization and not allow for urbanization with respect to the others. And all the time, the argument was the same. We need more land, because if not, it will be very expensive and it won't be affordable. So the way to go, the easy way to go, always is to go against the environment. It's about expanding the frontier for urbanization against the protected areas. I don't advise that. I don't say that you don't have to revise if the borders that you have established are the borders that are necessary today. You have to be able to revise, but you cannot buy always the argument that you need more land and so you have to go against the protected areas, because the only result from that behavior will be that you won't have any protected areas anywhere. Yeah? And then you will go against the sustainability of life itself. So you cannot go that way with in a blind, it's always the easy way to go. There are other ways to go, and I believe that humankind has enough creativity and enough possibilities of finding, good solutions that will balance both. The need for land and for housing, and the need to protect parts of the environment for the sustainability of the cities themselves, as the other question very well pointed out. And it has to be done. And if the price of land goes up, it's a good thing, because we have to value the natural resources that we have. When we consider natural resources free with zero price, and we attach zero value to them, we take the wrong decisions. We have to price right the scarce natural resources that we have. And there is no other way in many times that prices have to go up. Like in water. Water is not free. You have to pay for it. And if you don't pay in water also the need to protect, the water basins, then the water basins will be protected and the water won't flow to the cities and to anywhere else. So I am a huge believer in pricing ecosystem services, because it's the only way to really make it right in terms of individual behavior. And let me go to the last question. Let me say, I am not proposing for China to abolish the army. Okay? Because that is not a decision that can be taken by a stranger. So I want to be clear, circumstances are different in different parts of the world. And China has a very peaceful development from long ago, and it didn't have to take such radical decisions like my country too, in very special circumstances. But I think that China has adopted very strongly two of the policies. One, education. China is investing seriously in education. And I think that the problem that all of us are facing around the world, not only here, is not only the access, but the quality of education. How you can have massive education with high quality is really the question for the world. And China is taking very strong decisions and policies and programs for it. In the second one, as I said, China is a very peaceful society, and I think that that's a very important and stable, So it's a very important condition for the future in any society. Societies that are plagued by deep conflicts are much more difficult to move forward. Yes, and so the possibility of preventing conflict and having a sustainable and peaceful development is a key element for human development. And the third one is that I see, as I said before, that China is allocating, without abolishing the army, allocating a lot of resources to education and health. In health, China has had one of the more rapid expansion of social protection access that the world has experienced ever. Between, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember numbers so well, but if I'm not mistaken, between 2007 and 2010, 300 million people in China got access to health. Probably that is the fastest expansion of a health system that the world has ever known. Yes? So I think that there is enough, a real commitment to allocation of resources to the social priorities of the people. So in that sense, I think that a lot of the conditions are present.
Thank you, Professor Grynspan. So shall we have a last round of questions? And I'm sure I'm going to give it to you. I'm sorry that I didn't allow you to speak. So shall we have the mic to this gentleman in the front?
Thank you very much. I'm a student in the physics department, and I would like to ask 2 questions, if I may. The first one is on China specifically. So you have mentioned the need of emphasizing on local governance. But I see a few difficulties in the context of China because there is a very little civic engagement and democratic processes. So there is an apparent disconnection between central and local governments. And there is a lack of civil society's participation in the decision-making process. So my question would be how to generate this political incentives and the accountability necessary for the local governments to adopt this human-centric and qualitative approach of planning. And the second question is about, on a global scale, the UN has been advocating a green economy, but it has been rejected in the Rio +20, I think by the Latin American and Caribbean countries. So there has been criticisms about UN's role and infringement of the national sovereignty in terms of this issue. So how is the UN prepared to respond to such criticisms, and how will the UN proceed on this concept? Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Rebecca first, because she raised her hand earlier.
Thank you. Hi, I'm a CUHK student in the Urban Studies program, and I'd like to ask you a question about something you mentioned before and just now again on not relying on markets because they don't price commodities in a way that reflect their environmental impact or real value. Prime examples, of course, being things like meat products or fuel. And I'd be very curious, do you have any examples of policies or initiatives taken by the UNDP or others to price things that are in a more reflective way to create more sustainable consumer choices? Thank you.
Okay, the gentleman up front. Wow, there's still so many hands.
Thank you. I'm a visiting professor from Australia at the School of Geography here, and I would like you to comment, please, on a paradox that I see, specifically related to Costa Rica's dependence on ecotourism as one of the key generators. When we do site-specific measurement of the environmental impacts of ecotourism, undoubtedly it is probably the best form of ecotourism we can have. But I've seen a study, a German study, relating to Belize, close to Costa Rica, which is also highly dependent on ecotourism. And that German study indicated that for every UK visitor to Belize, travelling in a jet at 30,000 feet, they were responsible individually for the emission of 32.5 tonnes of air pollution. By comparison, a UK visitor going to Spain in a jet at the same level was consuming less than 1 tonne. In other words, it required 1 million visitors to Belize were responsible for as much pollution as 40 million UK visitors going to Spain. Surely that suggests there's a major paradox in terms of whether ecotourism really is a contributor to environmental sustainability.
Okay, I'm sorry for, I have to cut the questions because Professor Grynspan still has other engagement. So shall we just stop at here? And I'm sorry for those who have raised their hands.
Again, wonderful questions. Let me first go with respect to the weak civic engagement. I really see from UNDP's partnership, that the community engagement is going up in China, and there is a lot of discussions at the community level and a lot of what is called here public engagement. And I think that that trend will continue, especially with respect to environmental issues, because the environmental issues are really affecting the lives of the communities, and people are mobilizing to find solutions and are requesting from local authorities to answer to those demands. So I see much more civic engagement coming, in terms of environmental solutions in China than ever before. With respect to the UN green economy and Rio Plus 20 is a very good question. Let me try to explain the Latin American, what happened with respect to the Latin American position. First of all, the main worry was if the concept of green economy was going to be used as invisible barriers to trade. Okay? Because if green economy will start to be a condition for export commodities, then you will put a special trade barrier to those countries that do not comply with the ideal of a green economy. Okay? And then it was put as a tension between the developed and the developing world in terms of sources of growth for the future. The other problem was, but I think that problem is solvable. Okay? The other problem was a more conceptual one. Do you want green economy or do you want green society? It's not only the economy, yes? Because the consumption patterns is also important. You cannot put only the effort on production technologies. You have to put, also an emphasis on unsustainable consumption patterns. So if you don't do that, then it will be unbalanced, yes, in terms of the agenda of the world. And I think that this is a good point. And that's why in one of the main documents produced by the UN Environmental Program, UNEP, to the Rio Plus 20, they tried a definition of green economy that looks a lot like sustainable human development. Yes? Not only green economy in the sense of technologies that will be more green in terms of production. You need much more than that. So the problem of unsustainable use of cars, of individual cars in the developed world will have to be also a consideration, yes, for a green society proposition. And that is the way it was solved in the Rio Plus 20 outcome document. Okay, that's why it doesn't appear green economy per se, but the green development or green society, it appears very strongly. Okay, so I am more optimistic. It was a moment of high tension, but I am more optimistic. With respect to the markets and what examples of that, I recommend to you the high-level advisory panel on environment and on sustainability that the Secretary General put together 2 years ago. But let me give you an example of my country. We charge for ecosystem services. We charge for ecosystem services in a canon put on the price of water, for example, and also in energy. And I think that this is the right way to go. The rural areas provide ecosystem services to the urban areas, and we have to pay for that, because if not, those services will disappear. And I think that there are many examples out there of ecosystem payment pricing that has a very high, very good success stories, because what we charge in the canon for water goes to protect watersheds in the rural areas. And that connection is a very strong connection when you make it happen. So there are a lot of examples that we can provide, and there are many of them in that report of the Secretary General that I recommend to you. And the paradox from the Australian professor. Let me first say that it will be unfair to make to present this paradox with ecotourism. This paradox is true with any tourism, isn't it? You know, the problem of
tourism is very a long way from anywhere. Otherwise, tend to involve much.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Not necessarily, because People in the US go to Australia for tourism, and that's a very long distance too. It doesn't have to be ecotourism, yes?
We're not claiming that our tourism is not necessarily
No. But my point is, the only way to solve that, yes, is two ways. First of all, to change the source of fuel, and make travel more expensive, or make alternative sources of fuel more less expensive. Yeah, subsidies to fuel are very large in the world. So part of the problem with renewable energies is that they don't have a level playing field in which to compete, because there are a lack of subsidies to fuel energy. Yeah, first of all. But we will have to solve that for any airplane, travel, for business, for tourism, or for ecotourism. The second thing is that you can offset. Yes, you can offset what you have produced in carbon by your travel. And I think that more and more, some of the countries that, as my own, that are in ecotourism, are putting very strong systems for the offsetting of the carbon that is produced. We, in my organization, for example, we offset all the carbon produced by the travel of all our staff as a policy of the organization. So we pay back, to reliable ways in which you can offset the carbon. In the calculator that I showed in the morning, we calculate how many trees you have to plant, yes, and how to do that precisely to offset, the carbon you produce. So I will go both ways. I will try to make alternative sources of energy for traveling much more affordable, and I will try to go all the way to offset the carbon that you produce. In any way of the reasons that you're traveling, that will explain your travel, not only for ecotourism.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we're all very impressed by Rebeca Grynspan.
Thank you so much indeed for Professor Grynspan and also for ECAM's section. Let me say only two sentences. Yeah, it has been 2 wonderful hours, non-stopping 2 hours.
This is hard work.
Thank you so much, and also I thank the audience. We have students, professors, working professionals, and government officers, and well, very good presentation from all the people, all the citizens who care about the future of our city. And thank you for your inputs. Thank you your contribution, all of you, to this wonderful lecture. This is the end of the lecture. Thank you. Bye-bye.